I know not everybody is seeing their faces, but if you want to use your reactions, how many people are from Ohio? Just Matt and I? Maybe a few more? Okay. So about half of you are from outside of the state, or maybe half of you are from outside the state. I grew up here in Ohio, and I went to the University of Cincinnati for my undergraduate degrees in both interior design and architecture. Something you might not know about the design department at Ohio State, unlike most schools in the state of Ohio and programs across the state, interior design is typically with the Department of Architecture. But architecture is in the Knowlton School, and the Department of Design at Ohio State is in Arts and Sciences. So we have our own department. At the University of Cincinnati, it was called DAP, Design, Art, Architecture, and Planning. And here at Ohio State, we have the College of Art, or the Department of Art and the Department of Design, and a lot of different things. So in our department at OSU, we have 3 undergraduate majors currently. One is interior design, which is my area background. Another is product design, and our third one is visual communication design, or often referred to as graphic design. We're looking at developing some computer or experience design, and we have 2 graduate programs, one in design research, DRD, and one in DAME, which is also in our ACAD, the Advanced Center for Computer Animation. And that one's focused on computer animation and gaming. So I did my undergraduate degrees at the University of Cincinnati, just down the road, like I said, in both architecture and interior design. And then I worked in Cincinnati for a couple of years doing some higher education design. I worked on a bus terminal, and that's really where I started to look at practicing in a more sustainable way, particularly with public transportation and education school spaces. Prior to that, I had co-opted while I was at school in Seattle, and that was the first time I was introduced to sustainability in the built environment, particularly with LEED, which is an accreditation way to certify your building to be sustainable. And there's different levels like silver and platinum. And while you guys might be aware that East Coast and West Coast tends to be more progressive in their sustainability initiatives, here in the Midwest, when I came back from my internship in Seattle in 2001, Great Link, USGBC. When I came back from my internship in 2001, no one here was talking about sustainability. And so when I decided to go to graduate school, I went to the University of Oregon, which had a specific focus in their architecture program on sustainable design strategies. And they also offered a technical teaching certificate where you could focus on sustainability in a specific area. I focused mine on materiality and lighting design. And that'll come into play in a little bit later in the presentation, because you'll see how that translates into a course I teach here in materials. So like I said, my background's in architecture and interiors, but at OSU, I only teach interior design based courses or classes that are focused on all 3 disciplines. Matt and I were talking earlier, and I thought it would be a little important to kind of mention some of the background knowledge about what our department's mission or goals are. So we have the 3 majors, as I mentioned, in case you're interested in maybe pursuing those majors. I can answer questions about that and what those entail. But we also offer a design thinking minor, and that minor does have a lot of sustainability courses or focus inside the courses that make up that minor. And it's entirely geared towards non-design majors. So we have a lot of people from engineering or communications or marketing, fashion retail studies. We have a lot of people in other majors that take our design thinking minor. And again, those classes really do focus on sustainability, because as a department, I would say our 3 main goals or focus in the realm of design, because there are actually quite a few design programs across Ohio. So our sort of identity is one that we're a bit smaller. Like where I went to school, there was 40-ish interior design students, and we have about a maximum of 16 to 18 per class. So I kind of think of our program as more boutique, which allows us to be more focused. but also more collaborative. So we really focus our program on collaboration between our disciplines, whether that's in our design research courses or in a studio. And so in the presentation, you'll see the retail design or redefining retail design studio, this year's winning project that I teach, which is focused in sustainability for retail. And that is made up of our different design majors. So that's a collaborative studio. So I would say that that's one of our founding principles in our department is collaboration between multiple design disciplines. And in some cases, we even branch out and bring majors from other, or people from other majors into that studio as well. The other is a foundation of design research. So as I mentioned, our graduate program is design research and development. So our undergraduate program is built on 3 different design research courses, and a lot of our studios leverage that knowledge of design research and design thinking for our courses. So that leads into our minor of design thinking, of course. And then the other is in sustainability, both environmental and social, primarily. So we have a lab called the DESIS Lab, which is Design for Social Innovation and Sustainability. And the DESIS Lab was started by 2 of my colleagues, one in interiors and one in product design, but it's made up of a lot of our research work. And we leverage the lab and its network, which is a global network called DESIS, if you want to Google that, to really bring our projects here that are rooted in social innovation, social good, and sustainability to the world, and make those connections. And that's kind of where some of my classes fit in as well. And then I would say, I guess the last piece is we strive to make partnerships with practice and industry, and that's really been a big part of my goal. So the 2 projects that you'll see today that I'll present are partnerships with local design industry practitioners here in Columbus, as well as manufacturing industry. So it's a way for us to leverage the professional implementation, oh thanks Matt, for how we apply design in the practical application of the real world. So it's a little background. Do you guys have any questions right now? Is there anything you want to know about me before I dive in? I'm going to take the silence as a no. So feel free to add in the chats if there is anything that you have that pops up, or just interject as we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my slide deck and we'll dive in. So let's go to full screen here so you guys can see better. Hopefully that's good. All right, so I thought today I would give you a little presentation on designing a more sustainable future. Part of my work, both as a practitioner before I came to Ohio State, was in the practice of retail design. And we often designed for the future. So we would do, the Samsung store of the future, or if you've ever been into a brand new build CVS, not the ones on campus, but new CVS experiences, I worked on that, which is, the store of the future. And so when we're often thinking about where are we going as designers, we're always trying to forecast where we're going. So again, the projects you're going to see today are about that future and understanding generational values that are driving that future. Who are we really designing for? And I think that's a big part of what design is. It's designing for specific people, understanding people. So anthropology, sociology, psychology plays a big part in what we as designers do, because at the end of the day, people have to experience, whether it's physical with inside of a space or tactilely with the object that they're holding, or visually reading a graphic or some text, that has to be about the relationship of what we create and how it influences a human experience. So I'm going to talk about experiences to influence sustainable behaviors. To start with, as we talked about, it's really about understanding what the future is going to be and who the future is for. So a lot of my work is rooted in understanding a new generation and their value system that drives that. So that's also where sustainability comes into play. It's really important to understand that sustainability is one of those values, but what are the other core values that drive those generations? So by 2020, which is this year, Gen Z, which probably most of you are, because I assume you've probably been born after 1995, is the largest population worldwide, and you make up 40% of consumers in the US, Europe, and BRIC countries. This is really important because when we start to design for the future, we're designing for you. We're starting to think about Gen Alpha, which is younger than you, but we're trying to understand the things that drive your behaviors, your thoughts, your consumption, right? And sustainability is a factor to that. So for example, 78% of millennials would recommend a company they believe is a good citizen. That comes back to understanding social good, right? So while it relates to consumerism, it's really about that core values that are driving decisions. 71% of that generation would be loyal to that business. So when we think about, I just talked a little bit about Gen Z, millennials for a long time had replaced the baby boom generation as the major focus in understanding retail culture. But now Gen Z is taking over. Another fun statistic is 60% of Gen Z aspire to have a job that makes a difference and have a social impact. And if I were to ask all of you, I would assume that you, especially since you're here in this class and with this focus, that you would say that that's what's driving your career trajectory. That's why you've come to college, right? And so we're seeing that not just with you, but in a wide spread of Gen Z, more than half want to have a job that's meaningful, that makes a difference, that truly impacts society. And that, when we think about sustainability, whenever I say sustainability, it's important to know that we're really talking about the three pillars. Environmental sustainability, which if you say sustainability, most people are going to automatically default to environmental sustainability. But social sustainability is also a critical pillar, as well as economic. And so that's where, as a consumer-based culture, especially here in the United States, it's really, and around the world, but especially in the United States, it's important to understand how we can use what we do as consumers for a greater good. 76% are concerned about humanity's impact on the planet. Of course, that's environmental sustainability, but that's pretty astounding. 3/4 of Gen Z care about what your actions have as far as an impact on the actual natural environment. So when I start my retail design class, Redefining Retail, we are really trying to understand what is the future purpose of the retail store. So if sustainability is really important, what else is driving millennial and Gen Z's consumer behaviors? What are those ethics? What are those values? So when we think about it in the class as well as research, this is, I guess I could have done a little bit of interactivity. I don't know if you guys want to turn on your screens and chat, because I could have asked you guys, what is it that you care about? Matt, what do you think? Do you think they're going to engage, or should I kind of just go along?
Yeah, we can try it. If whoever can and is able, would you mind turning on your screens for a little bit? And then we can have a little bit of a discussion around this. And then you can turn it back off afterwards if you'd like. Thank you all.
All right, I'm sorry to see some faces. So much more engaging when I can see you. So if you want to turn on your microphones, turn yourself off of mute. I'm going to go back a slide and say, as Gen Z, what is the number one thing you care about the most? And this isn't about consumption, just in general. What's the thing that you care about the most that's on the top of or the forefront of your mind, like on a daily basis?
Bringing more good in the world than like I take out, I guess.
Oh, that's fantastic. So a friend of mine who works for Mohawk Group, a carpet company, they refer to it as handprints instead of footprints. So, you know, making sure that you're doing good rather than doing harm. Great. What else? Anyone else?
I also think just having as little of an impact as you can, no matter what it is. Like if you can't, like for one person to change everything and make it better is really difficult, but you can do your part to not make things worse. So I think that's probably how I see it.
Yeah. Is that about the planet, you think? Or about other things?
I think it's primarily about the planet,
Okay.
since that's kind of the largest scale, like hard to change on an individual basis type of issue.
Daniela, when you said about doing more good, is that about the planet or is it about people?
Kind of in general. I think
Oh.
it applies to both things because like I want to be a good like influence on all the people around me, but like also where I am too. You know?
Got it. Yep. Local and global. Great.
I would say like caring about other living things, like not just humans, but like the animals also, and like their habitats and stuff, and not just worrying about yourself, but that there are other lives that are at stake when like you do harm.
That's awesome, AJ. So you're thinking about your rings of impact, and so not just human relationships or environmental impact, but other our impact on other things, plants, animals, wildlife.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else?
Survivability. Make sure that our resource that we use less resources than we
Survive. Okay. So again, that's kind of like what Daniela mentioned, where we're not taking and depleting too much, right? So we're very cognizant about not taking too much away from what the planet offers, but giving back to it as well so that we can survive. Those are really great answers. So in the beginning of my retail design course, Redefining Retail, we asked that question. And it goes back to some of those statistics. So when we say, what's the number one thing you think about the most? Most often people say relationships. And that kind of goes to that idea of what is a relationship? There's human relationships. And I think us in this world of COVID right now, we're really cognizant of human relationships or our lack thereof, right? And we realize how important being a human, the relationship we have with people, the relationship we have with things, whether it's a pet or animals or nature, whatever that relationship may be, how important that is, how important it is to make meaning out of those relationships and memories out of those relationships. And that goes to this idea of experiences. So when we think about consumption, Gen Z spends more money on experiences than they do on products. And that's really fascinating because it goes back to reinforcing the idea of relationships. So that's about going and doing something with people. It's about socialization, and so when we think about social sustainability, how do we make our society sustained? How do we sustain the activities, the human connectivity, the relationships that we want? And what are those memories that we're having? What are the sensorial experiences that we're getting? Another thing that comes up is authenticity. And I think we see this a lot with the idea of so much technology. And even today, there's so much around fake news or alternative facts. And so this is really about understanding yourself, being truly authentic, being more transparent, getting past the fakeness, but getting to the root of authenticity, honesty, integrity. And that goes to also this notion of equality. So when people talked about what is it that they care about, when they said the word equality, that really gets to a broad spectrum of equality. It means diversity, and as far as racial ethnic backgrounds, it means equality in body type, acceptance of all things equal, providing opportunities for equal health, opportunities for equal education, equal salary opportunities. So it was really interesting that this one word can embody so many facets of society that we're trying to sustain, which leads to social justice. And social justice can be about environmental justice. It can be about racial justice. It can be, again, about those three pillars, economic justice. So sustainability weaves its way through in all of these aspects. And it's fascinating because these are the words that come up first. Giving back. You talked a bit about giving and not taking. And so while this picture is about monetary donation, right? The one for one, the Tom's idea when it may relate to consumerism, but it's about philanthropy, being active, engaged in your local community and giving more than you're taking. So all 6 of these really reinforce the idea of sustainability. And while sustainability was the last thing people said, which is odd because over the last 6 years that I've been teaching it, this class, sustainability was the number one thing people said 6 years ago. And it's kind of transitioned over the years. And I saw a distinctive shift probably around 2016, and we can all maybe conjecture about what may be influencing that. But sustainability went to a shift because I think as we shift to Gen Z, millennials were very focused on sustainability first. And these other aspects rose to the forefront, and sustainability being a factor of all of these became something that fell to the background. And I asked why, and they said it's because duh. I was like, what do you mean duh? They're like, well, of course we think about sustainability. It's just something we do. Like every decision is sustainable in some way or shape, right? And it really reframed how Gen Z starts to think about these other 6 factors as sustainability. And I thought that was really interesting to sort of share. And a lot of the research, generational demographical research, supports this idea, especially from the shift from millennials to Gen Z. What do you guys think? Do you concur with all of these? You can use your little reactions if you want to put a thumbs up.
Danielle posted in the chat.
Oh, great. Cool. So that leads me to understanding or having a conversation about slow fashion. So Matt mentioned that you guys were interested in what is fast fashion. So the opposite of fast is slow. Slow fashion is really interesting because it's a big part of my research and the course that I teach, this Redefining Retail. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Slow fashion is interesting because it was developed around 2007, and it really was a springboard from the idea of slow food. People have probably heard the term farm to table, right? So you go to a farm to table restaurant, it's really trendy, right? And it's really about understanding where your food comes from, who grew it, how it was processed, whether it was organic, were there pesticides being used, what are the sustainable farming methods that are being done, how far is it traveling? It's this idea of slowing down the process to understand what we're consuming as far as eating, right? So that same piece translated into slow fashion, and it was understanding the entire life cycle of the garments we're wearing. And that starts to inform product life cycle analysis. And where I'm going is saying, well, we need to build from that in retail design and look at how do we create a method for designing a more sustainable retail future. So slow fashion in the consumer sense looks at the ways in which products are designed, produced, consumed, and used in everyday life in order to live a more environmentally responsible lifestyle. And this is from Kate Fletcher. So if you're interested in knowing more, she's really sort of the founder of the slow fashion terminology and definition. And she is based in London at the Sustainable Fashion Institute. And some of the philosophies that ground slow fashion is this idea of connecting pleasure with awareness. So we all want to experience pleasure in our everyday life. We want to have joy and happiness, and we want to enjoy the things we're purchasing. But at the same time, we need to connect that sense of joy back to an awareness of education and what we're doing as far as an impact. Another is communicating our core values. So understanding what drives us, and that goes back to the values we talked about earlier. Another piece is educating consumer responsible sourcing and manufacturing, creating a connection to local and global community, which one of you mentioned as an idea. Creating trust, that goes back to that word authenticity. Fostering relationships, we just saw the word relationships between consumer, product, brand, and maker. So we being the consumer, product being the artifact or object, brand meaning the brand and its values, and then maker, who's actually producing it. So you may have seen the movement, Who Made My Clothes? That goes to that idea. And if you look on Instagram for that hashtag, you can find tons of information about that. It's a whole movement about who made my clothes. And then providing a sense of uniqueness through customization, care of craftsmanship, or scarcity. So that's the idea that if you customize something, if it has meaning to you, if it's memorable, you're going to care for it longer, right? So it's like the jewelry I wear, I have memories associated with it. I don't take it off. I'm going to have them for a long time. I'm going to pass them down. Or the pair of boots I wore in high school that were my mom's in the 70s, you know, that idea of caring for something, repairing something, right? So if we're thinking about sustainability and making our products last longer, we have to understand that sense of uniqueness and personalization and memory. So why is this all important? And I realize I'm going way over time, so I'm going to try to speed it up. So why is this important? Few fashion retailers, even slow fashion retailers, effectively communicate their mission, their values, within their store design, the experience of you as a consumer. So that's missing an opportunity to connect the goals of slow fashion and the values of these generations through the physical store experience. So how do we redefine retail? How do we learn from slow fashion to create a more sustainable retail culture? So current retail trends show consumers desire products that are scarce, customized, and carefully made. If that's the case, then what's the purpose of the retail store in supporting slow fashion? How does the retail environment support customers' desires for responsible consumption? So the retail store is really important because it is the physical link between consumer and producer. So it's the link, the physical, the tangible, the memorable, the sensorial link between you and the product that you're getting, who's making that product, and the manufacturer and the company's mission and goals. It's the physical store that provides the canvas to authentically and transparently communicate the brand's mission through more engaging and authentic storytelling experiences. So if we redefine the purpose, we can start to look at it as a place to educate, to engage, to communicate, to create experiences. The retail store must go beyond selling products to educate customers on responsible product sourcing and manufacturing while connecting them to their local and global community. This is really important because we don't really need physical stores. You can order from your phone to Amazon and have it delivered to your door, from my couch, from my desk, from my bed, right? From my car, right? It doesn't matter. So we don't physically need stores to make a purchase. What do we need stores for? We really need to redefine its purpose. And so if we think about it from a sustainability standpoint, it can become something that's more memorable, more engaging, more connective to our local and global community, connecting people, creating moments of memory, and therefore connecting the thing that we are purchasing, that object, putting memory and meaning into it. Therefore, we can slow down its product life cycle. So while we are all consumers, how we consume is just as important as what we consume. And this is really important. I want you all to go away from this and think about, how am I consuming? Is it, thoughtless? Am I just buying what I need or what I want when I want it? Or am I actually contemplating its purchase, what it's going to do and how it's going to impact my life and the impact it has on the planet and the people who made it? So a slow retail design process is what I teach in the Redefining Retail Studio course. We go through 3 different phases. We talk about design research. where we look at the different P's, specifically looking at planet, brand purpose, and product lifecycle. Then we develop a brand strategy, and then we develop brand placemaking. So if you are in business, I don't know if anyone's in marketing or considering marketing or anything else in the business area, something that looks maybe familiar is the first two pieces, because as we're talking about branding or brand strategy, that has a lot to do with the business side of things. So what differentiates is how we use those first two phases, specifically through the added components of sustainability that I've injected, and how it translates into what we call placemaking. And that's the physical experience. So if we look at the P's, there are 4 P's in marketing. There are 6 P's that build on that to create brand experiences in the retail design. And then I've added 3 additional P's to make it a brand spirit. That's where we look at the planet, our environmental impact, product lifecycle, and brand purpose. And then we can also look at the fashion, slow fashion industry and extrapolate from their goals into how we analyze our physical experience. How do we create something that's local and global? How do we use biomimicry? If you're not familiar, you might have heard biophilia or biomimicry. It's where you look to nature to develop. Biomimicry is where you scientifically look to nature to create something that is man-made. So like a swimsuit that emulates shark fins and the shark scales, for example, or the honeycomb structure of a bee's honeycomb can translate into an architectural structure, which is smaller and more stronger. Biophilia is our emotional connection to nature and how it influences us on a psychological level. And that kind of falls into that category too. Materiality, customer care, human engagement, and overall process. So I'm going to show you some examples of how this works. This is this last year, 2020's winning team. So the course I teach interacts with, I guess we're up to five different local design agencies throughout the semester, and we're partnered with a magazine called VMSD, Visual Merchandising Store Design. And the principals of these different firms interact with us throughout the semester, but at the end, they select a winning project that gets to present at the International Retail Design Conference each year. This year, the Silent Goods team, made up of Tyler Hatton, an interior design student, Kelsey Reagan from visual communication design, and then Catherine Hunter, who's also interior design, but is now a current senior. The other 2 were seniors last year and just graduated. So this was our collaborative studio, as I mentioned, and they chose a brand called Silent Goods. And I'm going to skip through a lot of this front end information so you can just see the pretty pictures at the end and understand our process. But I asked the students to find a brand that aligns with their values, but does not have a physical store. So that would be a digital native brand. They chose Silent Goods, which is based in the UK, and the company creates high-end luxury leather goods from a completely sustainable way, and you'll see it. Their values as a company are silent, made for life, sustainable, and transparent. They're labelless, so the designers came from other luxury brands, but they wanted to create a product that was more long-lasting, less trendy, more minimal. And they wanted to make a product that lasts a lifetime. And they wanted to create luxury without the guilt. So there's a lot that goes into luxury products that's really bad. So you may have heard like stories about how a luxury brand, if they don't sell their products, instead of doing them at discount, they'll burn them instead of recycling them. So there's lots of bad things that can happen in the luxury brand. So they also wanted to create a leather product that would be biodegradable. And so they use the entire cow, and I'll show an example of that here in a second, and they vegetable tan it so that it's completely built in a product life cycle biodegradability aspect. So there's 5 different pillars that they wanted to design for. They wanted to create a space that promoted sustainable lifestyle choices. They wanted to educate on the sustainability of natural versus faux leather. They wanted to create a space that evolves the product life cycle to a more circular model. They wanted to live local, but go global. And they want to form emotional connections with the goods. Oops. Okay, so the process is that the products come from the cows. There's a sustainable farm in Sweden that the products come from. And so this idea is, again, holistic. If you take the cows, because of which we can get into a whole nother issue about the meat and cattle impact on sustainability. There's different things to talk about as far as like if cows are fed seaweed, we can reduce methane emissions. There's a whole area there. But until more vegan, actual vegan options like mushroom leather are introduced, we can still use the cow hide so long as the food is, or the product is also being used for food. So it goes back to ancient philosophies of using every part of the animal and not just disregarding pieces. It's also important to understand farming techniques and the difference between American farming techniques, and that goes to the slow farm movement and sustainable agriculture. As we talked about tanneries, understanding vegetable tanning versus chemical tanning and its impact on the planet, and then how designers can leverage those ideas and translate them into products that the clients want and will care about in a long-lasting way. I'm going to skip all of these. I think Matt's going to send out the slide deck to the class so you guys can read more about this. It's important to understand who we're targeting from a market perspective so that we can create an experience that's memorable for these people. This is an example of all of the products. Again, very minimal, durable, long-lasting, timeless. Color palette is not trendy, it's classic. So it's really important to think about leather and metal fittings, adhesives, reinforcements, tanning, all of the aspects. So this is just a quick slide to understand the difference between faux leather and real leather. So faux leather, even if it's considered vegan leather, it's often manufactured from fossil fuels. So that goes into a whole nother sustainability conversation. And then it's treated with dyes and chemicals, another sustainability impact conversation, and then it takes 500 years to decompose because of those components. Overall, it's cheaper, but is it really? Because we need to start assigning value, cost, and dollars to our impact on our planet. So in the other aspect, we think about real leather. It's a byproduct of the meat industry, and depending upon how the cattle are raised, in Europe, they are required to be free range. So that means they're grazing in open land. And of course, the more grassland and trees and nature we have, the better it is about reducing carbon footprint. It's treated with vegetables, so it's a natural dyeing process, which allows it to be biodegradable, and it can take 25 to 50 years to decompose instead. However, it's more expensive. So that's a problem. So when we think about the product life cycle analysis, you guys have probably heard the term circular economy, and that's where this comes into play. So the product itself, if you see the existing life cycle, the tan color, the darker color, is what is in existence today, right? So they create this product and it goes to the consumer and they purchase something new. Our designers said, well, how do we make it less expensive so more youth consumers who care about sustainability can enter into this higher luxury product? And how can we keep the products in circularity longer so that they don't have to decompose until much, much later? So they developed service design. That's another buzz term right now, but they created more services. So you could rent a bag instead of owning it, and then you can return it, and then maybe you can purchase used. So looking at this idea of thrifted or gently used, and then you can sell it back, or you could recycle it. Or maybe if it's really worn, we could take parts and pieces of it and make it into a smaller leather good. Or you could purchase new and sell back or recycle. So this is what circular economy is about. It's keeping a product longer, making that product life cycle last longer, and preventing it from going to the landfill. So that means we need to think about repair, recycle, and how to condition it to make it last longer. This is just process. These are words. This is the process we go through. This is the overall inspiration. I call it a visual positioning board. It's the visual direction of the experience they're trying to create in order to create that memory and that sensory experience for the customer. We do some storyboarding and narrative, kind of cartoon-like, right? So we're kind of doing like this idea of the customer journey. We're thinking about digital touch points and apps, the store experience and what that might entail. And then the students are actually creating their store, and they picked to do this in Soho, London. These are floor plans. I know you guys aren't interior design or design majors, but it's probably kind of makes sense. You can see what a pub looks like, a store. And so this experience was really important for them to not just create a store that sold their product, but make the process of design transparent by showing the actual flagship store as the studio space. So this is where the designers would work, create, and the customers would have a transparent view into it. They also wanted to really highlight the slow food movement that informs their slow fashion movement to create this store, which would be a slow retail experience. So the pub itself right here would have visibility into the studio, connecting the product here and the leather hides that you would see to the actual food from the farm that this entire experience is coming from. So you'd be able to sit here and have a hamburger or a meat pie and see how that cow is actually translating into not only what you're consuming, but also the product you could purchase. So it's holistic. I'm going to skip through these. This is the floor plan, and we're going to get to the pretty images here in a second. This is what we call a materials board. It gives the overall sense of the furniture and the tactility of the materials used in the space. Here's the exterior. So this is the pub entry. And then here's the idea of the pub. So it really gives a lot of communication about the philosophy of farm to table. They created an entire menu. So they really created a restaurant that was based on a English pub culture. They took photographs from the farm to bring them inside. You can see transparently into the studio and into the bar. As you get through, another really interesting facet of their concept was that they wanted to lean into youth culture and how tattoo artistry has become a very big role in youth culture, but sometimes people don't want to tattoo on themselves. So cow hides, leather, is skin. So how do we bring that idea? So this is actually a tattooed leather wall, feature wall, and we would have, they wanted to have pop-up artists, tattoo artists that you would be able to see and hear that you could either get a tattoo from or have your product tattooed. That leans into that idea of memorable, right? So you would be able to have this capsule limited edition product that would mean something to you. You could pick the design, it's yours, you could pass it down. Or if it goes into a resale, then it has extra value because it was a limited edition that someone else might want, right? So we're trying to build in systems to think more holistically about how consumers behave and their desirability and the notion of memorability. This is an upstairs library, which would have lots more information about slow fashion. This is the retail store. In case you're wondering, we use lots of digital computer programs to develop this, from the Adobe Suite and Revit, which is a BIM, building information modeling program. This is the retail store, and they created these educational totem poles, which explain the philosophies. Every bag, actually, as soon as you lift up the bag, it had other additional information that would play on the top of the screen. I'll get to the other elevations. As you can see here, there's lots of other educational information embedded into this sort of storytelling wall. So photographs, digital screens that would be able to give you information about the products. And here's a listening booth, kind of like an art installation, and then you can see into the tattoo booth. And then this is the studio space, upstairs educational classroom. They also created pop-up shops that were specifically for sustainable this was at Box Park, is a sustainable shipping container shopping area outside of London. And this would be for their rentable products. And then this other one was for their capsule or limited edition resale. So that idea of gently used products, as we've seen, like Rent the Runway, or oh gosh, what's the new one I just saw? Thread Up. There's also a luxury one. And then they developed an app that allows you to create stories so that every bag would have a chip inside that you could download and write about the experience you've had with your bag. So it's almost like a journal that could get passed down from person to person. I don't really have much time, so I'm going to go through this super fast. Another collaborative project I do in my materials class is with Mohawk Group, which is a carpet manufacturer. And we do forecasting for sustainability, which again looks at Gen Z values to develop how design can influence a more sustainable future. And they develop a carpet based on what we call Generation Scrap, where they develop trends and design for a sustainable carpet solution. I'm not going to read these slides, but you guys can read them later. But it's just some statistics about waste. So the goal of this project is to look at design trend forecasting, filter it through the lens of global waste reduction to develop a carpet solution that would take waste out of the planet and create a sustainable product that could be created into a circular economy model. So the winning project 2 years ago, these were the top 3 projects. The winning project 2 years ago looked at climate refugees and the waste byproduct of climate refugees, which is life jackets. And then she looked at climate migration patterns, climate refugee migration patterns, to develop a carpet that would use the material, the nylon from the exterior of the life jacket, to be recycled, and the inside foam padding as a backing material, to develop a carpet that would visually represent land and water and the migration patterns. These carpets would have 3 different textures, one that's more organic and chaotic, and one that's more organized or going into direction. And you can see how they might be applied in a physical space, so that you could literally stand on a 24 by 24 inch carpet tile that would represent 1 human life and 1 life jacket from a climate refugee. So that's kind of the overall concept of that project. So you can see how we vary in a lot of different ways. And I know I haven't left as much time as I wanted to for Q&A, but we've got a little bit of time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was super cool. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about any of those projects or anything else that Rebekah's talked about, please.
I know I threw a bunch of information at you. Hopefully gave you some level of inspiration. I think I see, okay. Daniela says thank you.
We had some people who had to sign off a little early, but the students are working on projects right now. As part of the class, they're supposed to design a project to be implemented in the spring. And one group is working on a thrift store like pop-up. So a place where students could donate clothes and then sort through other clothes. So they're working on that project now. And so that's going to be an exciting presentation. It looks like Mariah put a question in the chat here.
Okay. How many of these virtual experiences like CVS have you helped to develop, and which one was your favorite? In practice, the CVS project is actually real. You can go to a physical store. I worked on that for 3 years. The fact that CVS is in Target was part of it, and the fact that CVS no longer sells cigarettes was a big part of our initiative to redevelop what healthy and sustainable means for CVS as a company. It took a very long time to convince them that we could create enough economic revenue from increasing pharmacy and putting a focus on health to reduce their sale of cigarettes. So that was a long, like, 1.5 year convincing project, but it goes back to understanding the power of marketing and understanding your consumers. My favorite project, Personally, I worked on a project for a company out of India 3 summers ago as a consultant for a local firm here in town. They're the largest manufacturer of motorcycles worldwide. And being in India, you can imagine how important a motorcycle is because it's an economic option for public transport or for transportation. But the company does a lot of really good things. Not only are their manufacturing facilities built and designed by William McDonough. If you've not heard of William McDonough, you should Google him. He wrote the book Cradle to Cradle. It is one of the founding books on sustainability that everyone should read. So he designed and built their manufacturing facilities. And the company as a whole puts a lot of social initiatives into teaching women, which you can imagine in India. They teach women how to ride motorcycles and become financially independent, mobility independent. They teach women how to be mechanics. They install water and sanitation around the country. They do a lot of really good things. And that would be what we call a generous brand. A generous brand, so there's 3 different categories of environmentally and socially responsible branding. There's purpose aligned, meaning like Dove, for example, talks about body inclusivity and racial inclusivity. That's purpose aligned. They're not really doing anything except supporting a purpose or a cause. Then there's purpose driven, where they're financially raising money, and you see campaigns that are like 10% donated profits from this company to do something else. The next level, though, is what we call a generous brand, and that's a company that puts boots on the ground to tangibly impact and change society. So it's not just about creating a product. Tom's is an example of that, where they employ local people to design and create their product around the world, and then they offer education, not just free shoes, but education, optics, medical exams, those kinds of things. So it's a actual tangible impact. So I think working for that company and designing their physical store concept that would educate consumers on sustainability in India and then translate to the rest of the world would be sort of maybe the most impactful project I've done recently. And I think with the student projects, they just get better and better every year. So I would just have to say the most recent class winning project is probably my favorite, but they just get more creative and innovative each year. Thank you, Mariah. Anyone else? I know we've only got couple other students on here, but. I'll put Matt, you can share my contact information with the class. We can put it in the chat, but that might not reach everybody in the video. So when you send out the link to this, feel free to give people my email if anyone wants to reach out. If you want to know more about design and how design impacts sustainability, or if you're interested in design thinking our minor or majoring in design, please reach out and let me know. Happy to answer questions.
I think
I have
Kirsten
a
actually has
question.
Oh yeah, happy to. Yeah.
Hi, I'm interested in polymer science in the materials engineering department. What materials are you interested in? Or do you just range in a whole broad amount of type of materials?
Great question. So I teach a course called Materials and Methods for Interior Environments. So we look at everything from new material innovations like products made out of PLA or cornstarch to mushroom leather, alternative ways to make products from nature is what I'm interested in, as well as how to make materials like the carpet project out of our global waste. So, example is Serena, one of the other winners 2 years ago, looked at the Great Pacific Ocean garbage patch and looked at how do we collect the waste from those specific beaches and turn them into carpets that visually represent that beach. So that way you can have an emotional connection aesthetically to the beach where the trash came from. So again, it's about understanding how do we create, for me, memories or emotional sensorial attachment, whether it's visual or tactile, creating an emotional connection to the materiality that you're experiencing and how it impacts our human psychology.
Cool. We might be working together in the future.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rebekah, for
Pleasure.
that was super interesting. I will share out the slides and your contact information, and I'll let you know if there's any students who want to connect separately. But thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining, for sure.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It was a pleasure.